Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you today? I'm Pastor Ken, the senior pastor here at Vertical Church, and welcome. Thank you all for being a part of today's celebration. Before I jump into the message today, I just want to talk to the family here for just a moment. Guys, the significance. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, and you know we do a food drive every year, but I want to help you to understand something. This year, through partners and other fronts of really meeting the needs in this community, we're looking to feed 1,000 families in this community. And that's amazing. And that's all possible through the generosity of the people of Vertical Church. And so listen, if you haven't gotten involved yet, if you haven't taken a bag, I really, truly encourage you and implore you. You have no idea how much your contribution can make a difference. It's really simple. Shopping out, we really need to stock up and ready for this event. And so if you haven't, love you to be a part of it. Guys, Jesus said, when you feed the hungry, you do whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. So thank you, Vertical Church, for your support and for your celebration on this end. Hey guys, if you weren't here last week, we began a new series called Making Change. We're talking about managing our resources, the resources that we've been entrusted with in a fashion that can both honor God and change our lives in a great way. And as your pastor, I couldn't implore you more that this is something that I would love you just to understand, embrace, and just not give into the normal tendencies to push back and say, no, not for me, or whatever. This has the ability to truly change your life. But sometimes it requires to make a change. So what are we learning in this series? We began last week saying this. We're learning less is more, stress is bad, giving is good. So say that with me. Less is more, stress is bad, giving is good. One more time, say it again. Less is more, stress is bad, giving is good. It's learning to put our lives in order as God designed us to do. And it's important because today we're going to talk about the idea of financial stress. And if you're living under it, if you've ever been under it, if you're experiencing it, you realize stress is bad. And there are opportunities. I take a chance to plug something. We do something here at Vertical. If you haven't been a part of it, it's called FPU, Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey. I encourage everyone to go through this and to know how to manage your resources in the most godly way. You will be better if you embrace what Dave teaches. He is phenomenal in that area, and it's here available because why? Financial stress is bad. It affects everything. It can affect your health, both mentally and physically. It can affect relationships. In fact, I looked this up again last night. In the Institute for Divorce, American Statistics, the number 2 reason that divorce occurs in the United States is financial issues. Financial issues. In fact, it destroys relationships. How many people live with regrets that they allowed that chasing after the wind, that they're looking for more for their career and for things that they wanted in life to cause them to not even know their own kids, not even spend the time with their family that they wanted to. And so that's why we've been looking at and embracing the understanding that less is more, stress is bad, and giving is good. Because listen, I have never met anybody who said to me, oh, you know what? You know, we're married, but we used to fight all the time until we got into debt. Man, our marriage is so much better because of all the debt that we have. It's never been so good. In fact, I've never met anybody that says, you know what, I come to church every week, Pastor Ken, to just thank God and praise Him for all the debt that I'm under because my life never been better. I've never had more peace, more grace that's flowing in me. No, I've just never met anybody in that way, okay? What I have met is people who'd love to give more. Their hearts go places that they don't have the resources and the ability to do those things. They would love to be ones who are blessed to be a blessing instead of the ones in need of the blessing. And that's God's intent. God wants our lives to be blessed. When we order our world around God's word, God's wisdom, God's plan, our lives are truly better. But often it requires us to make change. So what have we been talking about in simplicity, drilling down on it? It is the discipline of simplicity. And that's it's so difficult living in a nation like the United States because everything in our culture defies those ends of it. To live a life of simplicity, because simplicity is an inward reality that results in an outward lifestyle. So if you're taking notes with me today, here are the point. Simplicity is living a Christ-centered life that seeks first God's kingdom. Puts God first. It's living a life where God is first, because you understand. In James 1, it says, every good and every perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness, nor shadow of turning. And you and I need to understand that God is a Father, and God is raising his children. In fact, it's so important to understand, because if you're a parent, how are you raising your kids? Why do people refer to the term spoiled as a way that people raise children? Okay, the term spoiled means something's corrupted, something's wrong. And the way often that people can do, because you may think you're doing a good thing, but if you take care of every situation, in fact, years ago, a great book I read, it sold in the millions in the 80s. And the person who wrote it lived right here in Connecticut, Scott Peck, M. Scott Peck. He's a psychologist. He wrote the book called The Road Less Traveled. And I love the very first line of the book says, life is hard. And he talks about the realization that the idea of delayed gratification is the cornerstone of mental health. In fact, it is the very foundation of character building. You see, and often the parents can go about thinking they're doing the right things with not dealing with their children to recognize that life has consequences. So if you've ever been in a situation categorized in today's terms as either a helicopter parent, which means you hover around your kid's life and swoop down to save them whenever trouble arises, or what they've now referred to as lawnmower parents, where you basically lawn mower all the obstructions in your kid's way. You actually think you're doing the right thing, but you're hurting your children. That's not love. Why? Because God doesn't raise his kids that way. You read the Bible, you find the story of the prodigal son. When they wanted to go out and do their own thing, they got into a tough time. Did the father come riding in to rescue the kid out of the situation? No, he waited for him to come home, because the lessons being learned last for a lifetime. He was always there and ready when the situation, because you know why? What happens otherwise? You raise a generation of people to be entitled, to feel that I deserve everything without realizing what the generation before them went through to get what they have, to believe that I instantly am owed everything in life. So that's not how God raises his kids, because God raises his children to be like him, to be generous, to be blessed so they can be a blessing. And that's why it's so critical to see this. So again, simplicity, if you're taking notes, simplicity fosters contentment. And I need you to pay so close attention to these two things I'm saying, because you need to understand the culture that we live in, okay? But simplicity fosters contentment. It says this in 1 Timothy, it says, but godliness, Paul was writing to his chief disciple, Timothy. He's telling him because Timothy's now in a position where he's running a church. And he's trying to give principles into Timothy that are not just good for Timothy, but for the whole church. He said, godliness with contentment is great gain. But notice he said you have to have both godliness and what? Contentment. We live in a discontented world. But godliness and contentment is great gain. In other words, if you're a follower of Jesus, okay, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? It means to aspire to live a life like Christ. Well, here, let me help you with something. Jesus lived a simple life. Now, I don't mean by that Jesus lived poor. That has been a misunderstanding and a radical falsehood that has been embraced in many areas of the Christian world. That's not true. Jesus was not poor. And why would I say that? Let me help you. If you've ever believed that myth, number one, if Jesus was poor, then God the Father broke the old covenant, because Jesus was the only one who ever fully and completely satisfied the old covenant. And God had said specifically, if you do these things, I will bless you. I will do these. You just read Deuteronomy 28 when you go home, and all of these blessings. If Jesus didn't experience that, then God broke his word. No, God hasn't broken his word. Jesus had everything he ever needed. He was blessed in every respect. In fact, if you ever thought Jesus was poor, how many poor people have a treasurer? Think about it. How many poor people have a treasurer? Jesus had a treasurer in his ministry. I do encourage you to be a Bible reader and not just gloss over and read past it. Jesus' treasurer was named Judas Iscariot. And John, in hindsight, because nobody knew this when it was happening, that he was stealing regularly out of the bag. If there was hardly anything in the bag, you don't think somebody would have noticed something was missing? Don't you think John and James would have been calling down thunder on that boy? Peter would have taken him back outside behind the shed and taught him a lesson? No, none of them knew that was going on. Jesus had a treasure. In fact, here's the point. Jesus' clothes, the clothes that he wore. Poor men don't wear clothes that people gamble for. Did you ever think about that? In fact, when the Bible makes notation about certain things, see, you and I may not recognize it in our era, but you see in the day Jesus lived, to wear a cloak that had no seam, it was woven as a whole, was something that only a rare group of people wore. Jesus' own cloak, when the guards were gambling for his clothes, said, do not tear that up. We'll gamble for it, because it was worth something. But at the same, see, Jesus never had a need not met. Jesus lived a life of total trust in the Father, and the Father met his need every single time. But at the same time, Jesus didn't have a lot of possessions. Why? Because he didn't need a lot of possessions. Jesus didn't believe that the abundance of your stuff was life. Jesus lived life to the full. Jesus lived the most blessed life we could ever live. So to be a follower of Jesus is to embrace simplicity, but not poverty. Poverty is a curse, okay? So in essence, simplicity fosters contentment. Why? Because, listen, if you're taking notes, why is simplicity so important? Because awareness fuels discontent. Where does discontentment come from? Ask yourself, why are you discontent in certain areas of life? Discontent is whenever you believe what the enemy got the Adam and Eve to believe in the garden, and it's been going on ever since. They believed that what they didn't have was what would bring them happiness. They needed what they didn't have. And it was always that drive and idea. And so in essence, okay, discontentment is fueled by awareness, by looking around, because we live in a culture, come on, be honest with me. We live in a culture where we're bombarded by messages and images all around us. You can't watch a television show. You can't walk in a mall. You can't go somewhere where you're not given 1,000 images bombarding your mind about what you don't have and how you'll be happy if you have this gadget, if you have this gizmo, if you drive this machine, if you have this thing in your life, right? Constantly fueling our idea of what you don't have. Awareness fuels discontentment. It is entirely a product of our culture, because our culture is driven by a system that's not from God. Because listen, think about it for a moment. You were absolutely happy with your car until your friend rolled up with a brand new one that had all the latest gizmos and gadgets and everything, and then you're like, man, this is a piece of junk I'm driving. And then you're like, I gotta get me one of them. Or think about it, if you're married or your first home you own, you love your house till you visit someone else's house and you go through all that they have and you go, wow, we're living in a dump. We need one of those. Come on, ladies, work with me for a moment. Ladies, you were absolutely content with your kitchen until you went over to the person that just remodeled their kitchen. And they, now I gotta have granite countertops. Now I gotta have Sub-Zero appliances. Now I gotta have all the stuff, right? Guys, Come on. You know you were absolutely content with your stuff, your fishing stuff, your golf stuff, until you got along with a friend that had a brand new set of links, and you're like, whoa, I gotta have me one of them. I need a putter that's like got a head that's almost 3 feet wide, so I can't miss when I hit it. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. I'm being a little bit comedic, but listen, awareness fuels discontent. Now here, you need to know what's behind it all. In 1 John 2, the Apostle John wrote this. He said, for the world offers only, listen, only, a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. We think, man, if I have that, I'm going to be looking like somebody big and bad. I'm going to keep up with the Joneses. You know, the grass is greener. And you know why the grass seems greener on the other side? Because you haven't walked through the poop that's in their backyard. You have no idea what it costs to keep those things up, or the reality of owning something that you can't afford in time, in management, in upkeep, or just in financial. Come on, if you can't say amen, say oh me. You know this is true. I know it's hard, but listen. He said, but listen, this is what's behind it. All those ads you see, it's a craving for everything you see. Because your enemy works through the system of the world to make you discontent. Because why? When we're discontent, we have this ability. Because what we're talking about exploiting is appetites. Okay? And that's where you have to be honest. I have an appetite for it. Okay? Some of you I have an appetite for shopping. I have an appetite for buying things online. I have an appetite. You know, some people just have appetite, right? We have appetites. And here's the problem. What you feed turns into a need that leads to greed. Think about it. Whenever you give in to your carnal tendencies, whatever you feed, then you gotta have it. Okay? And once you gotta have it, then I need more and more and more. I never met anybody that says, well, I'm totally well off. I don't need to make any more. No, I don't meet people like that. They want to make more and more and more and more and more and more. Okay? Because what you feed turns into need, and that leads to greed, whether we like it or not. Because the enemy drives that end. And what we happen is that when we get desperate, the problem comes into it, is that all of a sudden, we try to figure out a way to get it. And we hear something like this. You ever been there? No money down, no payments for 5 years. And you look at each other and go, let's do it. Because we forget 5 years is coming. And there is a bill that will come due. And that's the foolishness of trying to meet something I want now without even thinking of whether I'll have the ability to meet that end later. And what happens is this. We fall into a trap. And what is that? If you're taking notes, listen. The trap is debt. Debt is the trap of materialism. Because everything in our culture is driven by this materialism. Gotta have this, gotta have that, gotta have this. And debt makes it available. Say, you can have it today. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Charge it. And don't even realize what is entailed. And I get it. Listen, I know this can be really, really personal. I know that some people, you never taught things, and you may be embarrassed. You may be ashamed. Well, listen, no guilt on these fronts. I'm imploring you, I'm begging you. I'd kiss your feet as your pastor. Get help. Because here's the point. At the point you admit, I need help. This is the point we all need. We need God. Because we don't control our passions on our own all that well. We desperately need God. And at the moment we're willing to admit that we need help, is the moment that God rushes in with help. Because why? God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So if you've never been through FPU, you need to. Come on, some of you need more than that. I'm so proud. We have a member of our congregation, Alea Linton Smith, who created a business a couple years ago called Hope and Sense. She will actually counsel people individually. And some of you need to admit it, that that's a better dollar spent than the way you've been spending it. But whatever you need to do, you need to get help. Stop staying the way you are and think that it's going to change. See, you got to get desperate. If you want to realize getting out of debt has to be something you become so absolutely committed to. That I love Dave Ramsey when he shows. It's kind of like the gazelle with the lion. chasing it. You need to run your butt off. You need to get out because your enemy walks about as a roaring lion. See, all those ads that you see, all the temptation to get into stuff is the enemy trying to get you caught up because his game is to basically control your life. And it's important to recognize. It's important to see. Because why? Look at this scripture in Proverbs. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Why do the rich rule over the poor? This is just as applicable today. That was written over 3,000 years ago than it is today. The wisdom is profound. Why do the rich rule over the poor? Because people are ignorant about how to handle money. Many times it's not taught in the home. It's not taught in school. It's not taught in college. People don't know how to handle money. And because they don't know how to handle money, they find themselves prey. They find themselves vulnerable to the problems that culture provides because we ask the wrong questions. We ask how much down and how much a month without even realizing what it's actually costing us because the borrower is servant to the lender. We don't realize that because let me tell you something. If nobody's ever told you before, you always have a choice. When it comes to money, you always have a choice. Because here is your choice. You can either work for money or you can have money work for you. If you learn to be rich, you learn how money works for you. But you see, people won't always necessarily tell you that. Thank God for his wisdom and his word. And right here at the church, wow, we're wide open to help anybody who is. But you have to have a desperation. It reminds me of a story years ago I heard. This young man this older businessman was mentoring this younger businessman, and the younger man wanted to know, how did you succeed? How did you really get ahead in life? How did you really find it? How did you work at it? And one day they were out fishing in a boat, and the young man's asking him again, I really want you to tell me the key. What's the principle behind it all? And the older man said to him, do you really, really want to know? And the young kid said, yeah. So the older man pushed him over the boat, and then he held him under the water. The young man's flashing and flailing, trying to get air. He wants to breathe so badly, and he can't believe this guy's holding him underwater. What's he doing? And then all of a sudden, the guy pulls him up, and the young man's like, taking every breath to survive, right? And the older man says, when you want it as bad as the air that you just had, then you're ready to succeed. And some of you got to get that determined about getting out of debt. You got to stop making the excuses, oh, we can deal with this. In fact, it is robbing you blind. We go into it. We don't understand. Because imagine with me, just imagine with me, if you didn't have that debt burden over your head, that you could actually buy something for cash. Years ago, I bought my car for cash. You're like, they looked at me at the dealership that way. Okay? I was in business for myself, but listen, it's like I've made bad decisions, so trust me, I'm no genius in this. You learn two ways in life. You either learn by following God's word or you learn by the hardships of life. I'm trying to help you avoid some hardships by learning from God's word, the wisdom that's contained in it. So in essence, imagine if you didn't have that burden, what you might be able to do. You might actually have options. You might actually be able to go on vacation and then maybe choose where you really want to go. You may be able to spend time with your family in ways that you only dream about. So here it is. We need God's help. So giving you some practical wisdom on this end. I'm going to put these into prayers because I hope this becomes a part of your prayer life. 3 simple prayers that all of us can pray. And with God, God knows our heart. You have to actually mean what you say. But here are 3 ways to put it out because it's the hands up surrender to say, God, I need you. God, I cannot do this on my own. God, I look to you, okay? And so here's the first prayer is this. God, give me self-control. God, give me self-control. Proverbs says this, like a city whose walls are broken through. I mean, what does that mean? A city that no longer has walls, it's what? Defenseless. It's vulnerable to attack. And until you learn, you could be entirely vulnerable in your financial life. He said, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks what? Self-control. Self-control. Why? Because what I know about all of us, every one of us has a 2-year-old living inside. You ever been to a store? You ever been out somewhere and all of a sudden your mom's wheeling a 2-year-old in a stroller or something, or walking with them on their hand, and I see something they want? What do? I want it now. You'll yell, scream, make a scene, whole thing, right? And you're looking at that going, wow, are they gonna deal with that? But all of us, because why? We are like that. It may not be in the same areas, but you have a weakness somewhere where your 2-year-old wants it now. I want an Easter egg. I want it now. I gotta have it. And all of us have areas. But what do you need to do? You need to discipline that 2-year-old. You need to make sure that they don't run the show. You need to keep your carnal appetites and tendencies under control. That's why we need God's help. That's why, because you know what? You know what you need to tell your 2-year-old? I brought this. My kids gave me this from Staples a few years ago. And if this helps.
No.
What do you need to tell yourself at certain times?
No.
If you need to walk around with it.
No.
Whatever.
N-O.
However it helps you. Because why? What you need to learn to be able to say is no. I want all of you to say it with me. No. Doesn't that feel better? But you need to practice it one more time. Say it again. No. Now say it like you mean it. No. Because if you're going to get yourself out of situations that you are presently in, you are going to have to learn to say no for the short term so you can say yes for the rest of your life. So what do I mean by that? You know, you come down to it. Sometimes it's the little things. Ladies, can I pick on you for just a moment? Ladies. Sometimes the ladies, it's little by little, because listen, it goes like this, okay? A lady walks by a sale rack, comes home, tells her spouse how much I saved. It was 60% off. Right? Such a deal for us. Last time I checked, it wasn't free. So guess what? You need to say,
No.
You need to say no. Guess what? In the time, listen to me. Ladies, here's another one, okay? Your nails, okay? I believe ladies do their nails for other ladies and stuff, because never have I met a guy that goes, man, did you see her nails? Just being real. And maybe saying no to like $5 coffee, where you can go to McDonald's and get it for $1. Listen to me, I love Starbucks, but I'm not in a situation, I don't have any debt, okay? You gotta learn to say no, because Dave Ramsey calls it this, scorched earth policy. You gotta be willing to eat rice and beans, do whatever you need to do to get yourself out of the situation. You gotta have the mentality. Now guys, I left you unscathed because you know what? Guys are the worst. They blow the whole family up at once, okay? They come home and go, oh man, I just bought these golf clubs and they were $500. They used to be $1,000, so you should be happy. Or they come home and say, hey, I just bought a new car and I bought one for you too. Guys blow it all up at once, okay? So equal opportunity on that front. So you need to learn to say, for a little while, so you can say yes for the rest of your life. Lord, give me self-control. Second prayer, God, give me understanding. God, give me understanding. Hosea the prophet said this, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because people are ignorant about financial matters, they tend to find themselves making decisions that they don't realize that they're really bad decisions, because at the moment it looked like a good decision. Then we're afraid to admit it because we're embarrassed or ashamed and all that. No, come on, grow up, get over it. Learn to change today. Make change so that tomorrow can be better. Why continue to do the same things and expect change? Ignorance on these fronts. Let me give you some examples, okay? How many people do I have in the audience that are under 30? Anybody here on that? So listen closely to me, because this applies to everybody. But you need to learn it now, okay? You need to understand these things. Because listen, a young adult may come out of college, may have a great career path, okay? And can I take a side message for a minute? Don't drink the college Kool-Aid. The name on your school, okay, and the cost that they cost you doesn't guarantee you're going to get a job that can pay what that cost you. Just something you need to keep in mind. Okay, don't drink the Kool-Aid. I'm serious. I've been in the hiring business for a lot of years. Generally speaking, I didn't look at what school they got it from. I wanted to know what they learned, what they knew, and how good they were at what they did. Just saying. But we drink the college Kool-Aid. Oh, it's only $68,000 a year. And they come out with so much debt that I don't care what career path you get into. When are you ever just going to pay your schooling off? Much less have a family, a home, or anything else. Okay, side journey's over. Listen, back to the listen to me. One of the areas, like you come out of college, you get a great job, and you're going to buy a car. So you say, I'm going to buy a car. And here's why you lack understanding, because we ask the wrong questions. We ask how much down and how much a month. And you go, oh, I can afford that, without anybody telling you the facts. So let me give you a scenario. Okay, a young person comes out to get a brand new job because they got a good paying job and they're going to buy a car. So they go out and they buy a car that's $48,000. Okay? And then they're going to finance it. Okay? So they finance it at a rate of 19%. Because most people don't read the fine print. And you don't own any assets at that point. These are average rates that people pay without even realizing it, okay? So the car loan is at 19%, and it's over 72 months. Okay, but I could afford how much down and how much a month. How much did the car actually cost you? Whether you realize it or not, it cost you $81,000. Now, did they tell you that one? Well, here's another one, okay? Here's another one. The average person under 30 years of age has $16,000 in credit card debt, okay? So, credit card debt of $16,000, average rate, you can look this up on Google. I did it again last night just to check my facts. Average rate for credit cards in America is 16.9%, okay? Now, when you're young and you don't have assets, you can't get one of the lower ones, you're getting a higher one. Some of them are 23, 28. I'm being at 19% is a kind of an average situation. So 19% interest rate on $16,000 of debt, for which you pay $250 a month. Any guesses of how long that will take to pay off? 48. Huh? 48 months? Anybody? I had somebody really smart in the back last service. Yeah, someone saw it. 40 years. Because do you know what? At 19% interest, $250 a month doesn't even meet the minimum. Or if you just pay the minimums, you pay forever. Listen. At that, because over 40 years, you would have paid $105,000 in interest on $16,000. Now, imagine this. Flip the scenario for a moment. Imagine if you invested $16,000. See, all the stuff I had to have now that your 2-year-old wanted that you don't even play with 6 months from now? I'm talking about the gadgets, guys, that are in your closets and in your cars, that your spouses. Where does the tension come? We know what it costs to buy it, but the issue is, are you even using it? Okay? So imagine if you invested the $16,000, okay, at an interest rate of 12%. You say, well, Pastor Ken, you're pulling numbers out of the air. Dave Ramsey's website says that the average of the S&P increase. Now, 3 markets out there, if you're unaware, there's the Dow, there's the NASDAQ, and there's the S&P. S&P is the most stable, but the average increase over the years for the S&P is 12%. He said, well, where can you get an investment that's at 12%? How about an index fund? Oh, I didn't even know that existed. Just bet on the market. You just go over the time. Okay, yeah, you may not have a windfall next year. That's the problem. You know why people lose money investing? Because they're driven by 2 things, fear or greed. That's what drives the markets. Fear, oh my God, it's going down, we gotta sell it and get out of it. 98% of people who invest in the stock market lose money because they bail out at the first sign of difficulty. But why did they get in? Because, man, I'm gonna get a windfall. I'm gonna be rich overnight. I'm gonna make my money work for me without even having the first education about investments. No, you need to get a plan. You need to know. We need to gain understanding. So, a 12% interest rate, $16,000 over 40 years, you know how much it's worth? $1.5 million. Now imagine, you could pay $250 a month, correct? Now imagine if you invested the same $16,000, okay? Go to the next one. The same $16,000, okay? You invested it, okay? And you added $250 a month to your investment, okay? Because you could afford that. At a 12% interest rate, same. How much would it be worth in 40 years? Guess what? $4 million. Now, you could sit and claim, 12%, you get all caught up with the details. Here's the point. Even if you had 8%, wouldn't you be far better off than where you are presently? Instead of scrambling over numbers on that end, just come to the realization, I would be far better off if I used wisdom and understanding. So God, give me understanding. Third prayer, listen, third prayer is this. Third prayer, God, give me a plan. God, give me a plan. Proverbs says this. Proverbs says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty. See, diligent people, okay, have plans that profit them, okay? But he says, as surely as haste. And you know what the word haste means in Hebrew? It means to go shopping. No, I'm only half kidding about that. Haste means an emotional decision. And how many regrets do we have about emotional decisions? Something didn't go right, I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna go shopping, I'm gonna buy something, I'll feel better. So we call it retail therapy, right? Or people are, emotional decisions, whenever anybody ever go on vacation and you get that scam aspect where they tell you, hey man, you just won. Okay, the full day at the beach, all meals included, you're gonna swim with the dolphins. You're gonna have snorkeling for free, and it's all to get you in a room to sell you a timeshare. I know, I've been there. I bought one. I didn't buy the one that had the annual fees on it, but I learned in my late 20s, I bought one of those things. I was at one of those things, I'm like, no, didn't see it coming then. I gotta see it. Here's the deal, okay? You need a plan. You see, if you're married and you work actually together on a plan, you can make your marriage stronger as opposed to fighting about where everything is going. To actually begin to work at a plan. That's why I'm telling you, FPU is phenomenal. Because FPU will give you a plan. They'll tell you need an emergency fund. Why? Because life happens. You didn't expect your refrigerator to go. You didn't expect the thing to happen, but it happened. And you have nothing to pay for it, so you go out and charge it and don't even realize what it costs you. Right? No, you have to have an emergency plan. Then, you need to employ tools like the debt snowball and get rid of your debt. And then learn about investing. So you need a plan. If you have a plan, here's something. Even if you're young, listen to me. You're not married. Listen, you need to have a vision for your financial life. Because the clearer the vision, the fewer the options, the easier it is to understand the will of God. See, that's the problem. Is so much. But you have a plan. Like if a couple has a plan, we're going to get out of debt in 3 years. You realize that every knock on your door, every email that's trying to sell you something, you need to say,
No.
No, we're not doing that. Why? Because that's not a part of the plan. The plans of the diligent lead to profit. You have to have a plan. You need to know what you're doing. You need to have a comprehension of financial matters. Why? Because less is more. Stress is bad, and giving is good. Sometimes it requires us to make change, but that change would be the best thing because if you and I actually began to live out the life that God intended us for living, we would live such a meaningful life without the pressure, without the stress, without the anguish of all the rest, because you have to learn to put blinders up. Some of you, part of your plan, you need to admit where you're weak. You need to cancel some subscriptions because stuff that comes to your house only fuels you with what you don't have. Some of you need to block, the clothing websites that send you the emails and all the other stuff. Some of you could use to just turn the TV off for a while so it stops fueling all the stuff that till you get a handle on it, till you realize, God, I need your help. Some of you could use to cut up those credit cards and go old school and actually pay cash. I'm like, who carries cash with them anymore? Well, if you can't manage it, then guess what? It's like an alcoholic that says, well, I can go to the bar with my friends and not drink. What are you, crazy? You need to put boundaries up in your life. That's a part of a plan. But it starts with admitting, God, I need your help. God, I can't do this without you. God, I desperately need you. And you know when you admit it, when you surrender to God, when you say, God, not my way, your way, God's help, God's grace, God's mercies, God will help you do things you thought were impossible. Because with God, all things are possible.